My name is Evelyn Carter, and on the day my only daughter married, I was reminded just how cruel life and people can be. The string quartet had just softened their music as the servers announced dinner. I smoothed the lace of my dress, the same one my daughter had begged me to wear, and stepped toward the chair placed beside the bridal table. My heart swelled with pride, even as unease lingered in the pit of my stomach. I told myself this day belonged to Isabel, not to the doubts I carried about the man she had chosen. I touched the back of the chair, lowering myself with care, when in one sharp motion it slid away. My body hit the polished floor, the sound echoing through the reception hall. For a heartbeat, there was silence, then a ripple of laughter from guests who thought it was some harmless prank. Pain surged up my hip, but humiliation burned hotter. Above me stood Lucas Gray, my daughter's new husband, his lips twisted into a smirk that carried no trace of kindness. "Maybe the floor is where you belong," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. Gasps replaced laughter. Isabel's voice cracked across the room as she rushed to me, the hem of her gown sweeping the floor. My hands trembled as I pushed myself up, refusing to let him see me broken. Around us, whispers flickered like fire through dry grass. Faces turned away, others stared, but no one moved. My dignity hung by a thread, yet I clung to it with all the strength I had. Then came the sound of measured footsteps. A tall man, gray streaking his hair, crossed the hall with the bearing of someone who had spent a lifetime in command. His eyes locked on me, widening as though he had seen a ghost. His voice broke the silence, trembling but steady. "Evelyn, is that really you?" The air shifted. Lucas faltered. Isabel froze beside me, and I knew that the story of who I truly was, buried for years, was about to change everything. The first time life forced me to stand alone was when Isabel was only 5 years old. One cold November evening, the phone rang while I was folding her tiny clothes on the couch. The voice on the other end carried the news that split my world in two. My husband had collapsed from a sudden cardiac arrest at work. By the time I reached the hospital, he was already gone. The sterile white walls pressed in on me as I held Isabel's small hand, trying to explain why her father would never walk through our front door again. That night, I sat in the dark kitchen, staring at the bills stacked on the table, fear crawling up my spine, rent, groceries, medical expenses. I had no idea how I would manage it all on the salary of a nurse who already worked more hours than she should. Isabel slept in the next room, her breathing soft and steady, and I realized giving up was never an option. She needed both a mother and a father, and I had to become both. The days blurred into double shifts. I poured coffee into a chipped mug at dawn before rushing to the hospital, then came home late at night with sore feet and the faint smell of antiseptic clinging to my clothes. Isabel would wait for me by the window, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, her smile enough to push back my exhaustion. We lived in a modest neighborhood in Boston, surrounded by shopkeepers and firefighters, people who knew each other by name. It wasn't glamorous, but it was home. And it taught Isabel early what mattered most: loyalty, kindness, and hard work. I didn't know then that raising her in those values would one day collide with the glittering world Lucas Gray carried into her life. Isabel grew up faster than most children her age. While other little girls spent afternoons lost in cartoons, she sat at the kitchen table sketching patterns on scrap paper. I remember coming home after a long night shift and finding her bent over a notebook, the lamp casting a halo around her dark hair. She looked up at me with ink smudges on her fingers and whispered, "Someday, Mom, I'll design houses so people feel safe inside them." That single sentence carried the weight of every sacrifice I had made. High school was a blur of science projects and art competitions. Isabel's determination pulled her out of the modest streets of our neighborhood and into the honor roll. I would brew another pot of coffee at midnight just to sit beside her, pretending to balance the checkbook while really just keeping her company. When acceptance letters arrived from universities, she danced around the living room, her joy filling the cracks that years of grief had left behind. I sold my late husband's old truck to cover what scholarships and loans could not. Every dollar I earned stretched thinner than paper, but I never let Isabel see my worry. On her graduation day, as she crossed the stage in her cap and gown, she stopped to hug me in front of everyone. "This degree belongs to you, too," she whispered. Tears stung my eyes as the auditorium erupted in applause. Isabel majored in interior design and poured her soul into every project. I watched with pride as she carved her own path, believing that the future held nothing but light for her. But it was during those early years of independence that a man named Lucas Gray stepped into her life, carrying with him a charm that would later reveal its sharp edges. The first time Isabel mentioned Lucas Gray, her voice carried a brightness I hadn't heard since childhood. She burst through the door of our apartment one January evening, cheeks flushed from the cold. "Mom, you won't believe this. Lucas proposed." She held out her hand, and the diamond glittered so sharply under the kitchen light it almost mocked the simple gold band her father had once placed on mine. When I finally met him, Lucas arrived in a tailored suit, his watch gleaming as if it had its own spotlight. He was polite in the way people are when they want to be seen as successful, but his eyes held a distance that unsettled me. Isabel seemed radiant, clinging to every word he spoke, and I wanted to share in her joy. Yet something in me recoiled. 2 nights later, he invited us to dinner at a restaurant far beyond my budget. Chandeliers sparkled overhead as if we had stepped into another world. I wore my best navy dress, carefully mended at the hem, and reminded myself that my daughter's happiness mattered more than appearances. Throughout the meal, Lucas made small comments wrapped in politeness but edged with something sharper. When the bill arrived, he slid it toward me with a smile. "Tradition says the bride's family covers this sort of thing," he remarked casually, though his eyes lingered, testing me. My stomach twisted as I reached into my purse. Isabel shifted uncomfortably, but I pressed her hand under the table and paid. Lucas leaned back, satisfied, as if I had passed some unspoken exam. That night, walking home beneath the city's flickering streetlights, I knew the unease in my chest wasn't just nerves, it was warning me, and soon I would find more proof that Lucas Gray's charm was only a mask. Late one night, while Isabel was home for a weekend visit, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open. Curiosity had been gnawing at me ever since that dinner, and I typed Lucas's name into a search bar. What I found only deepened the knot in my stomach. Photo after photo showed him leaning against expensive cars, cocktails in hand, surrounded by people dressed in designer suits. His caption stung, "Upgrading my life one smart choice at a time." Another read, "The old generation clings to outdated values while we're building the future." Then my eyes landed on a comment beneath one of his photos. "She's perfect, sweet, trusting, and her family won't complicate things." My chest tightened. To him, we weren't people. We were background props in his version of success. The next morning, I poured tea for Isabel and chose my words carefully. "Sweetheart, how well do you really know Lucas?" She laughed nervously. "Mom, he's ambitious, driven, he wants the best for us. But does he respect you? Does he respect where you come from?" I pressed, watching her smile falter. "He's from a different world, that's all. He says he wants me to fit in." "Fitting in shouldn't mean losing yourself," I said, setting my cup down. Her eyes drifted to the ring on her finger. "Maybe you're reading too much into it. He's never been unkind to me." I let the conversation rest, but unease gnawed at me. Because love doesn't speak through disdain, and soon. Lucas would show his true colors in ways even Isabel couldn't ignore. It didn't take long before the changes in Isabel became too obvious to ignore. She canceled dinners with her old friends because, as she explained, Lucas thought they were unsophisticated. Clothes she once loved, bright dresses, worn-in jeans, were slowly replaced with pieces Lucas suggested, things that looked like they belonged more to his office parties than to her sketchbook. One evening she came home from a dinner with him, her mascara smudged, her eyes red. I met her at the door, worry already tightening my chest. "What happened?" I asked, brushing her hair back like I used to when she was little. She tried to laugh it off, but her voice cracked. He makes little comments about how I laugh too loud, about how I should order differently at restaurants. It's like he wants me to be someone else." I pulled her into my arms, and she let herself collapse against me. Her shoulders shook, the way they used to when she scraped her knee as a child, except this wound ran much deeper. "That's not love, Isabel," I whispered into her hair. "Love doesn't shrink you. It helps you grow." She clung tighter, whispering back, "He says he just wants me to be better." Her words sliced through me. Better. As if she wasn't already enough. I held her until her breathing slowed, but my heart ached with a truth she wasn't ready to face, because I knew the difference between harmless flaws and dangerous patterns. And everything about Lucas screamed danger. I stayed awake that night, staring at the ceiling, listening to the steady rhythm of her breathing from the next room. A storm was coming, and I prayed I'd be strong enough to face it when it broke. The morning of Isabel's wedding dawned bright and crisp, the kind of day when even the city air smelled clean. I rose before the sun, smoothing the lace dress she had asked me to wear. "It looks beautiful on you, Mom," she had said days earlier, her voice full of love. I clung to that memory as I fastened the zipper and tried to quiet the unease twisting in my stomach. The ceremony was held at a grand garden estate just outside New York. White chairs lined the aisle, flower petals scattered across manicured grass, and a string quartet filled the air with graceful notes. Guests arrived in elegant attire, their laughter rising above the music. I sat quietly, hands folded in my lap, watching the world of wealth and power mingle as though it belonged to them by birthright. Then Isabel appeared, and every fear in me stilled. She was radiant, her gown flowing with subtle lace details she had chosen herself. For a moment I saw the little girl who once twirled in hand-me-down dresses, now stepping into a future she had built with determination and hope. As she walked down the aisle, I swallowed back tears, my heart pounding with pride. The vows followed, and Lucas's words came out smooth, practiced, designed to charm. Isabel's, however, trembled with sincerity. She spoke of loyalty, love, and the life they would create together. Guests applauded. The kiss sealed their union. I forced a smile, though my chest tightened. I prayed silently that the sparkle in Isabel's eyes would not dim under the weight of a man who seemed more concerned with appearances than with her soul. But prayers alone couldn't stop what was coming, and the reception would prove that my instincts had been right all along. The reception hall glowed with golden light, laughter mingling with the clink of glasses. Guests drifted between tables draped in white linen, servers carrying trays of champagne. I kept to my corner, determined to smile through the evening for Isabel's sake. When dinner was announced, I rose and made my way toward the table where Isabel and Lucas sat. My hand rested on the back of a chair, and for a brief moment I let myself feel part of the celebration. But as I lowered myself, the chair vanished beneath me. I hit the polished floor with a thud so sharp it echoed through the room. Pain shot through my hip, but the sting of humiliation cut deeper. A few guests chuckled, assuming it was a harmless accident. Then Lucas's voice sliced through the noise, cruel and deliberate. "Maybe the floor is where you belong." The laughter died instantly. Gasps filled the silence. Isabel's gown swished across the floor as she rushed to me, her voice breaking. "Lucas, how could you?" She knelt beside me, hands trembling as she tried to help me up. My dignity, though bruised, refused to stay down. I steadied myself, rising slowly, ignoring the eyes that burned into me from every direction. Whispers rippled through the hall like a wave, some guests turning away, others staring, unsure of what to do. Lucas stood smugly above me, his smile razor-sharp, as though he had proven something to the entire room. But then came the sound of measured footsteps. A tall man, gray streaking his hair, stepped into the light. His posture carried authority born of years in uniform. His gaze locked on me, widening in shock, his voice trembling. "Evelyn, is that really you?" The hall fell silent. Even Lucas's smirk faltered. Colonel Thomas Reed's words hung in the air, pulling every eye in the room toward us. His wife hovered just behind him, but he didn't glance at her. His gaze stayed fixed on me, trembling with recognition that reached across decades. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice steady though emotion flickered beneath it. "The woman standing here, Evelyn Carter, saved my life." The room stilled, forks frozen halfway to mouths, glasses lowered without a sound. Isabel clutched my arm, her wide eyes searching my face for answers I had never given her. Lucas's smirk faded, confusion tightening his jaw. Colonel Reed's voice deepened, commanding yet raw. It was April of 2004, Fallujah. Our unit was ambushed in the middle of the night. I was hit, bleeding, certain I wouldn't see the sunrise, and then this woman ran into the fire. She dragged me 300 yards through chaos and gunfire. Without her courage, I would not be here today. Without her, I would never have raised my children or stood at this wedding tonight. Gasps rippled through the guests. The string quartet lowered their bows, stunned into silence. For the first time in my life, I felt hundreds of eyes look at me not with pity or dismissal, but with awe. Isabel's grip tightened as tears welled in her eyes. "Mom," she whispered, voice breaking, "why didn't you ever tell me?" I swallowed hard, my throat thick. "Because doing the right thing doesn't need an audience." I answered softly. Around us, the murmurs grew louder, admiration replacing the earlier ridicule. The balance in the room shifted, the weight of truth pressing down on Lucas as surely as a judge's verdict. And in that moment, his armor of arrogance began to crack. The silence after Colonel Reed's words weighed heavier than any applause could. Every gaze turned toward Lucas, stripping him bare in front of the very crowd he had sought to impress. His face drained of color, the sharp confidence he carried like armor collapsing under the weight of truth. Isabel's hand slipped from mine as she stepped toward him. Her voice trembled, but it carried through the hall. "You humiliated my mother," she said, each word deliberate. "The same woman who saved your father's life. You tried to make her feel small when she is the reason you're standing here today." Lucas opened his mouth, but no excuses came. The guests stared at him like a jury waiting for a defense he couldn't provide. His father's stern eyes bore into him, filled with disappointment deeper than any reprimand. I drew a steady breath and faced him as well. "Respect isn't about money, Lucas. It isn't about titles or appearances. It's about how you treat the people you claim to love. Tonight, you showed everyone who you really are." A low murmur of agreement spread across the room. I caught sight of guests shaking their heads, others whispering with disgust. The illusion Lucas had built for himself was crumbling, piece by piece. Isabel wiped her tears, standing taller than I'd ever seen her. "Love isn't about control," she said firmly. "It's about partnership, and I refuse to spend my life with someone who mistakes arrogance for care." Lucas's shoulders sagged, his jaw tight with silent fury, but he had no ground left to stand on. And as his father finally spoke, voice quiet but unyielding, "Son, tonight your character has been found wanting." I knew the choice now belonged to Isabel alone. For a long moment, the hall seemed to hold its breath, waiting for Isabel's response. She stood at the center, her gown glowing in the golden light, tears still clinging to her lashes, but no longer weakening her. Instead, they gave her strength. "I can't do this," she said finally, her voice steady though her hands shook. "I will not tie my life to a man who humiliates the person I love most in this world. This marriage is over." A stunned hush fell before a ripple of applause broke out. It started with a single guest at the back, then spread until the entire room rose to their feet. The sound filled the garden, not for a celebration of vows, but for the courage it took to break them. Lucas stood frozen, his jaw clenched, but he could not stop the tide. His carefully constructed image had shattered, and all that remained was silence. His father's disappointment was etched so deeply across his face it left no room for argument. Isabel turned back to me, her eyes red but her expression fierce. She took my hand, gripping it with a certainty that told me she had finally chosen herself. "Thank you, Mom," she whispered, "for showing me the truth and for teaching me how to stand." I wrapped my arms around her, my heart swelling with pride and sorrow in equal measure. For years I had promised myself I would protect her, but that night she proved she could protect herself, too. As we walked out of the reception together, the lights of New York shimmered in the distance. I no longer feared the shadow Lucas had cast. My daughter had chosen dignity over illusion, and that was a future bright enough for both of us. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy these family drama and revenge stories, please subscribe and join me for more every day.